The battle for AI memory is no longer decided inside the factory. The competition is now spreading upstream into the world of materials. That's how I see it. Micron has announced up to $3 billion of investment in the United States. At first glance, it looks like just another capital spending headline. But when you read what's actually inside this plan, you can see that the way the semiconductor industry fights is starting to change.
Hello everyone, I'm Ty, with 31 years in the semiconductor industry. Today, we're looking at a major investment that memory giant Micron has announced to strengthen the semiconductor supply chain in the United States. By the end of this video, you'll understand why a memory maker is putting money into a wafer maker, how this single move could redraw the industry map, and what it means for Japan's material suppliers. Let's start with a familiar story. Imagine a popular bakery chain with stores all across the country. Over the past few years, orders for bread have exploded. Every store and every factory is running at full capacity. Everything they bake sells out. So the company makes a bold bet and starts building new factories, one after another. But as they build more factories, they notice something. To bake bread, you need flour. And for their signature premium bread, they need a special flour with perfectly uniform grains. Here's the catch. The mills that can produce this special flour with consistently high quality can be counted on one hand worldwide. What makes it even trickier is that most of those mills are overseas. If a ship is delayed or trade rules suddenly change, the brand new factory they just built could grind to a halt for lack of flour. The more factories they build, the more flour procurement becomes the weak point of the whole business. So the bakery chain makes a decision. It puts money into a mill that is planning to build a factory inside its own country and works toward a long promise. Sell us your flour for the next 10 years. For the mill, this is great news too. With a major customer committing in advance, it can confidently go ahead with a bold expansion. It's a deal where both sides win. In other words, this contest is not about who bakes better bread. It's a competition one step upstream, where you get your flour, from whom, and how reliably. Now, let's look at how this simplified story is actually playing out in the real semiconductor industry. Micron is a major American memory maker. It produces DRAM and NAND, the chips that store data, as well as HBM, the high-performance memory used for AI, all in its own factories. Recently, its big investments have kept coming. DRAM and HBM projects in the United States and NAND investment in Singapore. And now, Micron has announced a plan to invest up to $3 billion to strengthen the semiconductor supply chain in the United States. One of the pillars of this plan is $500 million of strategic financing for Global Wafers. Global Wafers is a Taiwanese silicon wafer maker that produces 300mm silicon wafers, the base material that semiconductors are built on. This support will help develop and expand the company's 300mm wafer plant in Sherman, Texas, and boost its manufacturing capacity. On top of that, the two companies say they plan to sign a 10-year supply agreement for 300mm wafers. But here's one point worth noting. This agreement has not been finalized yet. According to the primary sources, it is expected to be signed later, subject to final documentation, regulatory approvals, and the satisfaction of closing conditions. The direction is clear, but it is not a done deal. Behind all this is the expansion of AI demand. Memory products like DRAM, HBM, and NAND are becoming more and more important. At the same time, making cutting-edge memory is impossible without a stable supply of high-quality wafers. In other words, Micron is moving to secure not just the factories that make the chips, but the materials that feed those factories. Now, let's dig deeper from a professional's point of view. When people talk about AI semiconductors, attention naturally goes to NVIDIA's GPUs and to HBM. But AI data centers need much more than HBM. DRAM for training, memory for inference, NAND for SSDs, and underneath all of them, 300mm wafers as the common foundation. The demand base is spreading far wider than the headlines suggest. Behind the flashy chips,
the quiet question of who supplies the foundation is starting to matter.
Another thing worth understanding is what kind of company Micron is. If you're a company like Apple or Nvidia that focuses on chip design, your lifeline is securing production slots on the most advanced processes at a foundry, a contract manufacturer like TSMC. But Micron makes DRAM and NAND in its own factories. So what Micron went out to secure was not someone else's production capacity, but the material it feeds into its own fabs, 300mm wafers.
What makes this interesting is the stage, the United States. It's not just Micron. TSMC, Intel, Samsung, Texas Instruments, Global Foundries, and others are all pushing ahead with factory investments in the US. More factories naturally means more demand for the wafers that go into them. And if you're building fabs in America, you want the entry material, the wafers, sourced reliably inside America as well. That's the logic at work here.
This is where Global Wafers is gaining presence. The company says that among the wafer suppliers participating in the U.S. Semiconductor Support Program, it is currently the only one able to produce advanced 300mm wafers inside the United States. As America works to bring the semiconductor supply chain back home, the Texas plant is becoming exactly the piece that fills that gap. Global Wafers has its own circumstances too. Wafer plants require enormous investment, and to move to the next phase, long-term commitments from customers become critical. That's where Micron showed up, with $500 million of support and a plan for a 10-year contract. The way I see it, this is not just a promising order. It looks like a strong tailwind pushing the company's U.S. expansion forward. The two companies have also mentioned exploring joint development of next-generation wafer technology. So this story is about much more than buying materials. For Micron, it's about securing the upstream materials that support memory manufacturing inside the United States. For Global Wafers, it's a customer commitment that raises the value of its U.S. operations. The competition in AI memory is no longer decided by factory capacity alone. It has become a total war that includes the upstream supply of materials. That's how I see it. Now, what does this mean for Japan? In the global silicon wafer market, Shin-Etsu Chemical and Sumco hold top-class positions with tremendous strength in both quality and volume production track record. But here's the thing. Being strong in global market share and being the main player in America's domestic supply chain are not the same. From the standpoint of the U.S. government or the chip makers building fabs in America, what matters is one question. Is there supply capacity inside the United States? Global Wafers is a Taiwanese company, but on that one point, making 300mm wafers on American soil, it can become a key piece of the U.S. semiconductor supply chain. And I don't think this trend stops at wafers. In photoresists, the light-sensitive materials used to print circuits, Japanese players like JSR, Tokyo Oka, Shin-Etsu, and Fujifilm hold strong positions. There's also ABF from Ajinomoto, a material used in the high-performance substrates for AI chips. ABF is protected not just by patents, but by materials know-how, production quality, years of adoption track record, and accumulated customer trust. It cannot be replaced easily. Even so, if America keeps pushing to source materials domestically, I believe Japan's suppliers cannot afford to treat this as someone else's problem. Let me wrap up. With an investment plan of up to $3 billion, Micron has moved to secure wafer supply, one step upstream from its memory factories. The competition in AI memory is turning into a total war that includes materials, and Japan's material makers, strong as they are in global share, will now have to face a new yardstick. Can you supply from inside the United States? That's the one thing I'd like you to remember from today. That's all for today. I'll keep bringing you semiconductor news and analysis, so if you found this useful, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. This has been Ty on Semiconductor News Decoded.